Dear listeners, welcome to European Talks. My name is Strahinja Subotic, and I will be your host for today. Today, we're discussing a really important topic. It is the re-emergence of the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the territory of Nagorno Karabaha. Just for brief explanation for the sake of our listeners, Nagorno Karabaha is officially recognized as a territory of, internationally recognized as a territory of Azerbejdžan. On the other hand, it is populated mostly by Armenians who are making claims for self-determination, and this is one of the key disputes that lasts in the region ever since the war ended in 1994. There have been occasional clashes between the two sides, but it appears that these clashes, which have started 5 days ago, have been the bloodiest so far. So in order to have a full picture of the existing situation, we invited two prominent experts, one from Armenia and the other one from Azerbaijan, to discuss the ongoing issue. I have the pleasure on the one hand to introduce Mr. Benjamin Bogosyan, who is the chairman of the Center for Political and Economic Strategic Studies in Yerevan. He is also former director of the Institute for National Strategic Studies at the Armenian Ministry of Defense. And finally, he graduated at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy in the US. On the other hand, I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Anar Jahangirli, who is currently a consultant in public affairs and communication. He is a former diplomat from Azerbaijan with the focus also on Nagorno Karabaha. And also, finally, he graduated at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. My dear guests, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
It's really my pleasure, and I hope this discussion will be really fruitful. I would like just to touch upon the historical background. We don't have too much time. Just for the sake of our listeners, as I mentioned before, the war ended between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 1994. There have been occasional clashes regarding Nagorno Karabaha and surrounding regions. And to this day, we haven't seen such big clashes and bloody casualties in this region. On the one hand, Armenia claims that it was Baku who started shelling civilians in Nagorno-Karabakh with artillery and air forces. On the other hand, Baku defends its decision by saying this is only a counter-defensive mechanism, as it's only responding to other sides' provocations. So I would like to maybe start with Mr. Bogosyan. Maybe we can use the first names to make the conversation easier. So Benjamin, I would like to ask you, what's your take on this situation, particularly as both sides are making contradictory claims?
Again, thanks for the invitation, and I would like to welcome all the listeners for the podcast. So regarding the current situation, on September 27, Azerbaijan launched attack against Nagorno-Karabakh. Unfortunately, within the last 4 years, this is a second attempt by Azerbaijan to stop the peace negotiations and to seek to solve the problem by the force. We have the large escalation also in April 2016. Of course, this time situation is much harsher because Azerbaijan uses much more manpower and firepower and armed power than in April 2016. And my understanding is that simply Azerbaijan maybe is frustrated by negotiations, or maybe Azerbaijan thinks that he has advantage on Armenia, on Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, and he is able to solve the problem by the arms. But definitely all actors involved, except Turkey, all actors involved in this problem, OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs, Russia, United States, France, we just 3 hours ago made a statement. They all stated that this problem can be solved only through the negotiations. No armed solution is possible, and also they called to all parties to stop the hostilities. And definitely Armenia is ready to do that.
If I can ask you just a follow-up question, why would Azerbaijan be frustrated by negotiations?
My understanding is that they want to come back to the situation of 1988, which is a little bit strange because in 1988 we have the Soviet Union. There is no Soviet Union, but they want to come back to the situation of 1988. This is of course not possible, and they are frustrated. This is my guess that through the negotiations they are not able to force Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh Republic to come back to the situation of 1988.
For the sake of our listeners, what was in 1988?
In 1988, Nagorno Karabaha autonomous region was a part of Soviet Azerbaijan.
Okay, thank you. Anar, what's your take on this?
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I'd like to greet everyone listening to your podcast. And it's a very interesting times, and we are in an uncharted territories. And it's a very tough spot to be at this moment of life, at this moment of history. It is very difficult to analyze a complex problem like Nagorno Karabaha in a very short period of time, but we should probably look at the when my colleague from Armenia says about coming back to the situation of 1988. I don't think Azerbaijan wants to come back to the situation when the USSR existed. Azerbaijan, just like Armenia, became independent in 1991 and were recognized by the world community within the administrative borders that they had while they were part of the USSR. And Azerbaijan was admitted to the United Nations within those territories, which includes Nagorno Karabaha Autonomous Region and 7 adjacent districts, which are not part of, which have never been part of Nagorno Karabaha Autonomous Region, and where almost no Armenians lived ever. Right now, we are in the situation when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Both countries became independent, and the conflict between them became an international conflict. So Armenia and Azerbaijan engaged in military hostilities against each other. And until the year 1994, when we agreed on the ceasefire, Armenia managed to capture, maintain its control over Nagorno Karabakh and capture 7 adjacent districts that we were talking about. Since 1994, we were having negotiations with this group. So the Minsk group comprised of more states than we hear the names of. So we mostly hear the names of Russia, the US, and France. So they are the co-chairs of the Minsk group. So they are, what they're doing, they're visiting the region. They have been visiting the region.
Okay.
Heads of governments for collecting their feedback and coming back with proposals. Since 1994, Azerbaijan declared its commitment to peace, and we are in 2020. It's 26 years past. Nothing happened. And we are in a situation where Azerbaijan still has its territories under occupation. And I believe there is Azerbaijan has every right to defend its territorial integrity.
Just a follow-up question. I think it was yesterday that the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution calling both sides to stop fighting and to cease war. How is it resonating in Baku and among Azerbaijani citizens? Will they accept this resolution?
It resonates very well in Azerbaijan, as the 4 other resolutions of the United Nations Security Council since 1993, where it explicitly mentions Nagorno Karabakh region of Azerbaijan Republic, which confirms the Nagorno Karabakh being part of Azerbaijan according to international law. And Azerbaijan is committed to United Nations principles and calls for the cessation of hostilities based on the and coming back to the negotiations to solve the conflict based on the principles and norms of international law.
So is it ready to stand down, as we see that Armenia also is planning to, or is it planning to stand down? Are both sides, what does it take for both sides to stand down? I would like to ask you, Anar, really shortly, then Benjamin.
Sure. I believe it's in both sides' interest to come back to negotiation table. and when the time permits and when the parties agree on that, because when you start when there is a war, it's never easy to stop it. So the parties have to agree on basic principles how to stop it and then move forward. So I believe both sides would be interested to stop the war, because that's not in the long term, that's not the solution to the conflict. Neither Armenians nor Azerbaijanis are going to leave Caucasus. We're going to live side by side, but we have to live side by side with respect to dignity of each other.
Benjamin?
Yes, as I mentioned, the recent war has been launched by Azerbaijan, so it's Azerbaijani decision to stop the war. We are simply defending ourselves, and we cannot stop defending as far as Azerbaijan is going to attack us. So in this time, a decision should be made by Azerbaijan. If they stop the hostilities, hostilities will be stopped. If they continue the hostilities, Armenian side cannot not to defend.
When you say we are defending ourselves, do you mean Armenia as a country or Armenians as a population? As far as I know, Azerbaijan hasn't attacked Armenia.
When I'm saying we, I mean Republic of Armenia and also Republic of Nagorno Karabaha. As you know, Armenia is officially the guarantor of security of Nagorno Karabaha Republic. So it's Armenia and Nagorno Karabaha Republic. And regarding the attacking Armenia, unfortunately, yesterday and day before yesterday, they also were direct attacks and bombing of internationally recognized territory of Republic of Armenia. So hostilities are not only against Nagorno Karabaha Republic, but hostilities are also against Republic of Armenia.
Let me just interject here that the
please do briefly.
Yeah, so that the military operations from the Azerbaijani side is a response to Armenian provocation and to escalate the conflict. And Azerbaijan at this moment sees no other way out of the situation other than the withdrawal of Armenian forces from the occupied regions. And after that, it's possible to stop the hostilities.
It is complicated because the two sides continue accusing each other. And there was the European Association of Journalists who actually claimed that there is an open information warfare happening in the Caucasus, where the two sides continuously blame each other, but also by using fake news. So I do agree it is maybe difficult to conclude who did the first move, but maybe we should focus on what can be done in the following period. And my question for Benjamin is, the Caucasus has always been on the crossroads between large powers. On the north, we have Russia. On the south, we have Iran. On the west, we have Turkey. So my question to you is, does peace depend on these foreign powers, major powers in the region? And if you can particularly tell us more about Russia's involvement with Armenia and its support, because so far we've seen that Russia is trying to balance the interests between the two sides, but it is interesting to see how Russia will play its card, considering that Armenia is not only a member of the Eurasian Economic Union, but it is also a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization led by Russia. So please let us know what's your take on this.
So first of all, of course, external actors, especially Russia, of course, has their role in peace protests. But I do not agree that everything depends on them, because Armenia, Nagorno Karabakh Republic, and Azerbaijan, they have their agencies, and of course also peace depends on them. I do not agree that everything depends on external actors, and Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Nagorno Karabakh Republic has nothing to do here. Regarding Russia's position in this conflict, yes, you mentioned that Armenia is a strategic ally of Russia. We have Russian military base deployed in Armenia. And Armenia is a member of Collective Security Treaty Organization and Eurasian Economic Union. But also Russia is interested to have its influence in all South Caucasus, because Russia views South Caucasus as a part of former Soviet space, which Russia admits or perceives it as a part of it's not a zone of sphere of influence or zone of influence, but at least Russia believes that this is a zone of its privileged interests. So Russia wants to have influence in all other South Caucasus, And definitely, Azerbaijan also is a significant state in the South Caucasus. Yes, and if you take into account the current hostilities, Russia seeks to keep a balance. We see the conversations between the Russian foreign minister with its Azerbaijani and Armenian counterparts, and also Russia is actively calling for cease of hostilities. And as I mentioned, we just a few hours ago have a joint statement by President of Minsk Group co-chair countries, Russia, France, and the United States. But my understanding is that also Russia is not interested in the growing role of Turkey in South Caucasus.
Okay.
But we see that especially in recent escalation, Turkey is fully involved here, both with Turkish military, with Turkish instructors, and also we just hear official statements from France President Macron and also from Russian Foreign Ministry that Turkey sent hundreds, if not thousands, mercenaries from Syria and Libya to the conflict zone. So my understanding is that Russia is definitely not interested in growing role of Turkey here. But yes, also he seeks to keep a balance because he wants to have influence in all South Caucasus and not only in Armenia. But my understanding is that if Turkey's involvement in the conflict will grow, if Turkey or Azerbaijan will directly attack, I'm speaking about large-scale attacks, not like bombardments which we saw yesterday or the day before yesterday. If there will be direct military large-scale attack either by Azerbaijan or by Turkey against Armenia, definitely Russia will implement its security guarantees, both bilateral and also multilateral within collective security treaty organization.
Thank you. As you mentioned Turkey, we can see that not always Russian and Turkish interests are compatible. So, Anna, what's your take on this? Do you think they're on the opposite sides in this conflict, or can the bridge be built between these two sides and maybe avoid any proxy wars in the region?
Before going to that part, I'd like to address one question here, one point here. That's about the Nagorno Karabaha so-called republic. It really reminds me the toddlers calling the imaginary friends when they don't exist, but they think that they do exist, but everyone else knows that they don't. So when we can talk about Nagorno Karabaha people, Armenians living there, which are citizens of Azerbaijan, and their property, their security, their places of worship must be respected and will be respected by Azerbaijan. But when we're talking about the illegal regime installed there by Armenia, it's nothing more than an imaginary entity.
Can you tell us now more about the geopolitics?
Going back to your question about Turkey and Russia's interests in the region. Well, it's no secret that Turkey is involved in the region in the large transport and energy projects. Turkey has been one of the first investors in the region, in Georgia and in Azerbaijan. We have very close partnerships in terms of the political, social, and economic levels with Turkey. And it's no secret that Azerbaijan has military cooperation with Turkey. It's widely known, but we have never had, and in this particular instance, that the hostilities, there are no Turkish fighters. There are no Turkish soldiers fighting on the side of Azerbaijan. Not to say about the mercenaries. Azerbaijan has a big army, equipped well. The population, the demography tells us that a 10 million population, having its army of more than 100,000 active army members, it does not need a couple of hundred mercenaries and risk its reputation by bringing them to the battlefield and really undermine its own credibility.
So, excuse me, how do you explain the fact that some Western media even covered the issue and mentioned that there are some Turkish-backed fighters even from Syria?
I am familiar with those reports, and all of them is based on he said, she said. There's no concrete evidence of a captured or dog tags of any fighters or any killed or anyone who was actually being there. Again, if it's the case, and I'm telling you from this show, I'll be the first one to call it, and I'll be the first one to mention that it has been the case. But up to date, those who claim that failed to produce any credible evidence. It's all based on reports that someone interviewed someone in Syria saying that, again, some other people, some imaginary people came and tried to recruit people.
Okay,
but there's no evidence. There's no evidence that any fighter or any mercenary actually has been present on the battleground.
Okay, Benjamin, did you read the same reports? Do you have the same impression this is all hearsay?
No, because this is not only media report, as I mentioned. Today, the president of France, and definitely you cannot say that Mr. Macron is a media journalist. The president of France and also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation officially made statements that they have clear evidences that Turkey deployed hundreds, if not thousands, mercenaries from Syria and Libya. And I fully agree that definitely this is against Azerbaijani interests. But I believe that this is show how much influence Turkey has on Azerbaijan, and this is show how Azerbaijani foreign and security policy has been captured by Turkey.
But as you mentioned now, Turkey, as far as I know, the Armenian and Turkish border is closed, right?
Turkey closed its borders with Armenia in 1993, and still border is closed.
But how are Erdogan's statements, for example, support towards Baku perceived in Yerevan? Do they see it as a security threat? And what are the expectations over there?
Definitely in Armenia, the statements of President Erdogan supporting Azerbaijan, and President Erdogan is the only international actor or international leader who even today in his speech in parliament stated that no ceasefire hostility should go on. And it's a little bit strange to hear such things from the president of country who is openly calling for continuation of the war. And given the fact that Turkey also continues to deny the Armenian genocide, definitely these statements and fully support of Azerbaijan, including arms sales and also mercenaries, is deployed very negatively in Armenia. And we believe that this is a continuation of Turkey's foreign policy to destabilize several regions in Middle East, in Libya, in Eastern Mediterranean. So in Armenia, we see all this as a continuation of President Erdogan's assertive policy to increase Turkey's role and maybe to recreate in some form the old Ottoman Empire.
Now
I'd like to refer briefly to
please do in 10 seconds if possible.
Yeah, well, it won't be in 10 seconds, maybe in 20, but
okay.
What you're referring to as the statements from the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia and France. So Minister of Foreign Affairs Russia didn't name anyone. We think they actually meant the Lebanese fighters who are fighting from the Armenian side, who are well documented their arrival to fight in Armenia, and on the French statement, I believe, well, it's politics. There's a huge Armenian lobby in France, and they are exerting their pressure on Macron to say those words.
As we mentioned France now, I would like to touch upon one of the key aspects of this conversation, that is the role of Europe, the role of the EU, not only of the member states. For example, Anad, with Azerbejdžan, the EU considers it to be one of the key energy partners, strategic partner. They are also negotiating a new framework for political and economic relations. And also Azerbejdžan is, alongside Armenia, a member of the Eastern Partnership. Can you tell us what has been the role of the EU when it comes to the development of relations with Azerbejdžan, but also when it comes to its response to this conflict? And later on, Benjamin, I'll ask you the same question.
Gladly, since I also worked in Brussels for a number of years as with the European Union and European Commission. So the European Union's strategy since the conflict started was concentrated on helping both sides for rehabilitation of the war-affected territories, and also refugees and internally displaced people. As you know, Azerbaijan had about 1 million refugees and IDPs combined, those who had to flee their lands in and around the Nagorno Karabaha region. So EU has been helping with those efforts to both Azerbaijan and Armenia. And you had a special representative for South Caucasus who had been traveling to region just to, I would call it just to be in touch without exerting any, or without conveying any real message in terms of the solution of the conflict or bringing the parties together. So EU has been a very passive actor in this respect, whereas the several EU member states like the UK, Germany, or France, they've been very vocal about the solution of the conflict on different aspects of it. So I would say EU's role would be welcomed in the region, especially because the European Union is an actor which respects the international law and principles of national law, and involvement of EU from that point of view is very much welcomed in Azerbaijan.
Benjamin, now the floor to you. How would you comment on the EU's role when it comes to addressing this conflict? And also, we need to know that EU and Armenia have been developing partnership. They have developed partnership in 2017, a comprehensive partnership, and the number of grants and donations have started to increase since the change of government in Armenia 2 years ago. So how would you comment on this aspect when it comes to the EU?
First of all, Armenia really values its relations with the European Union and is part of Armenian balanced foreign policies to develop relations not only with Russia, but also other actors involved in the region, including EU. We are also developing relations with NATO and the United States. Yes, as you mentioned, in 2017, Armenia signed a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement with the European Union, which came into force in 2018, approximately by 80%, and we are waiting for the ratification of agreement for all 27 EU member states for this agreement to come fully into force. But yes, we really appreciate EU support for Armenia, especially not only after 2018 or after April-May Velvet Revolution of 2018, but also before the revolution, EU was one of the key supporters of Armenia. I mean, technical support, grants, capacity building, or supporting reforms in several sectors. And this process is continuing. And just recently, EU provided 30 million euros for Armenia for overcoming the COVID-19 pandemic problems, and another 30 million euros to make judicial reforms in Armenia. Regarding the European Union involvement in Karabakh conflict, there is no direct EU involvement. We have simply several EU member states, which are the members of Minsk group. As I mentioned, France is one of the co-chairs. Germany also is a member of this Minsk group, along with other EU member states. But EU as an organization is not directly involved here, and EU mainly supports the efforts of Minsk group co-chairs. But the key here is that EU also strongly believes that there is no military solution to this conflict, that the conflict should be solved through negotiations. Definitely, negotiations is a difficult thing, but it's much more better to have the war than another war and then another war. So EU position is clear, and this position is welcomed by Armenia, that no military solution is possible and conflict should be solved through negotiations.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll continue discussion. Let me just wrap up a little bit. We're running out of time. Just last question for both of you. Anna, we can start with you. We did touch upon the role of the EU. It has been developing partnerships in the Caucasus region and has made investments, grants, and loans. But I would like to maybe look forward. How can we maybe make, if you had a chance to talk to European officials, what would be your advice? What should the EU do to maybe become a more active player And what can it do? Can it contribute? Is there a European solution to this issue, not only to de-escalate the conflict, but also to find a sustainable and long-term peace agreement?
Definitely. There is a European solution to the conflict, but unfortunately we're a bit far away from Europe. Although we consider ourselves part of Europe, but we're farther away. I wish our energy and our time would have spent on bringing innovation, science, and technology to the region, and bring prosperity to the people of the region. And the EU has definitely that potential to do that. But again, it will be possible only after this final solution of the conflict, which will it doesn't have to be to the advantage of one or another, but it has to be a mutually accepted agreement by both sides. So for us, it means, I will say it in very short statement, for Azerbaijan it means Azerbaijan's territorial integrity was very high level of autonomy for Armenians of Karabakh, guaranteed by the European Union and by the world powers, so that they enjoy their language, they enjoy their rights to cultural rights and political rights within that territory. But it has to be within the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan.
Benjamin, your take? Do you think the EU has a role to play in the future?
Just a very small remark. For Nagorno Karabaha Republic Armenians, it's very difficult to believe that they can live in peace and prosperity under the jurisdiction of Azerbaijan, given that just now Azerbaijan is shelling the villages and cities of Nagorno Karabaha Republic starting from September 27, and another war has been waged in April 2016. So it's really very, very difficult for them to believe this. Regarding what can EU do, my understanding is that first of all, EU should support the modernization process of all three republics in South Caucasus, especially in Armenia and Azerbaijan. I mean modernization, capacity building, and by doing this, my understanding is that in a long-term perspective, European Union could bring also peace to this region, or make the peace more tangible and touchable in this region by supporting modernization, by supporting reforms, and by bringing rule of law and good governance to all three republics of South Caucasus.
Thank you. I mean, the issues you mentioned and the role that the EU can play, if I can touch upon maybe my region, the Western Balkans, we also always say that the EU is actually welcomed, and that its role in terms of scientific development, innovations, investment, it can be really beneficial. And we also here think that the EU can play a bigger role, and we as civil society always make calls and make recommendations for the EU. But I would also maybe like to touch upon the Western Balkans and Caucasus parallels, just to end this conversation, this podcast. I have many friends both in Armenia and in Azerbaijan, and of course I talk to them about this conflict. On the one hand, some of my Azerbaijani friends tell me that Serbia should maybe focus more on the principle of territorial integrity, as it has issue to retain Kosovo as part of its territorial integrity. On the other hand, some of my Armenian friends tell me that Serbia should maybe focus more on the principle of self-determination, particularly as there are Serbs or even Croats in Bosnia who are actually vocal about it. So my question for both of you is, as we in Balkans know how politics can be complicated, and we know that the principle of territorial integrity and the principle of self-determination are both sometimes hard to reconcile, do you think that these principles can be reconciled, and do you see something in this way, any parallels for the Balkans and the Caucasus region? The final floor goes to Anar, then to Benjamin.
Well, it's probably a never-ending discussion, but I mean, we believe it is possible to reconcile those principles, especially because given the fact that the in international law, the term self-determination has been they started to use that term more in the context of decolonization, and that is what it meant to become free from colonies, from the Western colonies. And nowadays, when we talk about self-determination, in certain instances that principle is used and can be used, but it cannot go beyond. It cannot go contradict to territorial integrity principles. And when we're talking about the self-determination, we have to look at the lawful execution of that right, not just saying that, okay, I'm independent and I voted for my independence without the people who live, some of the people who lived in that territory. Well, I'm talking about Azerbaijanis of Nagorno Karabaha who were not part of that decision of Nagorno Karabaha region to become independent, and that right was executed illegally, given the constitution of the USSR. If we can enter into that discussion, I'm happy to share more. But I believe it, as Benjamin rightly mentioned, we have that question of trust in each other. When I sincerely believe that we can coexist together, but Benjamin, he says that they have some preoccupation, some doubts about the sincerity that we're offering them autonomy to the Armenians of Nagorno Karabakh. And it goes the other way around. When we say that we're committed to peace talks, and they say they're committed to peace talks, and then we start negotiating for 26 years, we don't see any result, then how can we have that trust on the other party's sincerity and the nobleness of its intentions? So
okay, maybe that's where Europe can come in and maybe try to reconcile these issues. Do you have the same view, Benjamin? What's your take on this, and is it possible to reconcile? I'm asking you both from the perspective of the Balkans, but also Caucasus as well.
First of all, I believe that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. So okay. I don't think that it's right to mix all conflicts in not even post-Soviet Eurasia, but post-socialist Eurasia, like situation in Balkans, Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. It's not a right way to mix all in one thing and try to find one solution or one-size-fits-all solution. Each conflict has its history, each conflict has its peculiarities, and also each conflict has its peculiarities within international and also within Soviet Union law. I definitely can argue that the independence of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, which by the way was declared in September 1991, before dissolution of the Soviet Union, it was done fully in compliance with Soviet Union laws and also in compliance with international laws. But definitely I understand that if we go into the legal debates, we will need maybe for another 1 hour podcast minimum to present our arguments. And I don't think that it's maybe the right way, and definitely we do not have the time. But again, I would like to stress that I don't think it's a right approach to say, okay, if something happens in Balkans, it means that the same thing should happen in South Caucasus. Okay. So again, no one-size-fits-all solution.
Thank you very much. I need to conclude this podcast episode, even though it was my great pleasure to talk to the two of you. We haven't maybe reached the same conclusions, but it is important that we have actually talked to each other openly, and I really appreciate the two of you for sharing the floor with me. I would also like to ask you, do you have anything else to add before we conclude this episode that we haven't touched upon? Any last words?
I'd like to add a few words, and I'd just like to my Armenian colleague to know that sometimes I hear I see on Armenian media that people in Armenia believe that there is a lot of hatred to our Armenians, and we just want to come and kill everyone. That's not the case. As the ethnic group or as a neighbor, I don't think we have a hatred towards Armenia, and it's based on the fact that our territory is occupied, and we have to address that. And if we don't address that, so for 26 years we see that it wasn't addressed, we come to the situation like this. So if we see a reciprocity in that desire to solve the problem, I think we can get there.
Okay, Benjamin, do you have any last remarks?
Some few words. I hope that the hostilities launched by Azerbaijan will be stopped, and our neighbor will understand that the only solution is possible through negotiations. And yes, negotiations is a tough thing. We have conflicts which have been negotiated for decades. So you cannot say, okay, I want a negotiation, but I want to come to solution within 1 year or even within 10 years. And also we may discuss why the negotiations have been stalled. My understanding is that they have been stalled because of these modern principles or the phased solution approach, which has been elaborated since mid-2000s. This is my understanding, that this is the key reason of this stall of the negotiations. This is a phased approach solution, which is being discussed. So if we will be able to overcome this phased approach solution and to think about new possibilities or new framework for negotiations, negotiations will be much more successful. And my sincere hope is that peace, or at least ceasefire, will come back to our region as soon as possible.
Okay, I do think it's really important that we're ending this podcast with a positive note, and that is that we all think that the conflict should be over as soon as possible. So with this message, I thank you once again. I thank also listeners for tuning in, and I really hope that we'll all stay in touch and stay in touch with future podcast episodes from the European Policy Center. Thank you and best regards.